Good morning. Let me add to OMP. Back in the dark ages, I went to OMP as a young student here, and I came back like Liz, determined I was not going to go back. However, I would dedicate my life to preparing men and women for the global church in theological education. And you see the Hispanic Ministries program here at Gordon-Conwell. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to present a dear friend, fellow Hispanic American, one who has a very interesting history, born of a North American father, Guatemalan mother, raised in Houston, Texas, going to school with George Bush and the like, and committed to the Hispanic American cause. Every summer of his life spent in Guatemala, so he's fluent, without an accent, unlike me, and a man that I've learned to appreciate. Yesterday he shared and based on Genesis, that we ought to look at the immigrant, the stranger, as a man, woman created in God's image, and that aspect of how we should treat the stranger. Today he will continue that journey through Old Testament narrative, and Dr. Carroll is professor of Old Testament at Denver Theological Seminary and vastly involved in immigration reform in this country. Danny, come forth and preach the word of God unto us.
Muy buenos días. Morning. I'm going to move this, if that's okay. First of all, thank you for inviting me, and may the Lord bless this place and the people who teach and study here. What I want to do today is kind of shift gears. Yesterday we talked about looking at immigrants as people, and realizing if we begin to put even the call of Abram in its context, the whole issue of blessing takes on new significance as we see it in the context of migration and death, and to be a blessing even as we are blessed and as we prepare people, as we engage them to become priests of God. That's kind of what I was doing yesterday. Well, today, I'm an Old Testament prof. Any Old Testament people here? Oh, they are. Okay. I didn't see any hands go up, so that was very depressing. Good spiritual answer. He went to Sunday school. Okay. What I want to do is talk about biblical narratives. The Bible is full of migrant stories. And as I mentioned yesterday, as we think about looking at the Bible from the diaspora, I want to challenge you this morning to put on the lens. Yesterday we talked about a lens. The lens is into our reality, but the lens is also about reading the Bible. And what we're going to find is that we need to appreciate that the Bible nos acompaña en nuestro peregrinaje. The Bible walks with us. It accompanies us in our journey of faith, especially as we think about immigrant communities of faith. Can they find themselves in the text? And the answer is yes. So I want to tell you stories today. The Old Testament has some great stories. The patriarchs. You're probably thinking, why did we read Genesis 12, 1 to 13? Am I all right? Okay. Well, if you were listening to the last part of the story, it's about going to Egypt. You see, there was a famine in the land, common in that part of the world. And what they do is Abram with his wife Sarai and the clan, he's the head of a clan that would include Lot and probably servants and animals, and they make their way to Egypt. They're hungry. You know how the story goes. As they get close to the border, he says to her, if they ask you, tell them you're my sister, not my wife. Now, he says this in part, you see, because he wants to save himself, but it's actually a wise move culturally, because in that culture, if someone would have wanted to take her, they would have to get permission from her brother, and so what he was doing was buying time for himself and time for her. But the point is, As they get close to the border, we know that Egypt had a series of forts along its eastern frontier to monitor movement. See, they had the Nile, and there was always harvest and food, and so they're always dealing with people coming in looking for food. And so what Abram, the great father of the faith, does to save his family and to eat, he lies to get across the border. You ever thought about that? Desperate people do desperate things. And if it takes lying to get across the border to feed your family, that's what you do. And she's willing to put herself at risk as a woman. And if you know the immigration stories of those coming across the border, they're most at risk of rape and abuse. But they're willing to do it to feed their families. Have you thought of Abram as an immigrant story? How about Joseph? That's an interesting story. Obviously a very dysfunctional family. The brothers all hated Joseph, apparently with good cause. He was a jerk, and the family favorite. That's a bad combination. And so the brothers are off tending the sheep, and he is sent to get news from them and to send them food. And you can see the brotherly love in the family. They all want to kill him. But finally, one of them convinces the rest just to sell him into slavery. And he lands at Potiphar's house. He's hardworking. In fact, he's so good and honest that he becomes the steward of the household. But you know how the story goes. Potiphar's wife tries to seduce him, and he runs away. But who do you think the Egyptian authorities believe, the immigrant or the Egyptian woman? He's the one that ends up in jail, but he comes out. He interprets dreams, and now he's second to Pharaoh. And then his brothers arrive, again because of famine, and they are going to buy food. And when he sees them and he hears them and he engages them as an Egyptian. See, when he came out and was given this place in the kingdom, he was given a new name. He was given an Egyptian wife, and he had 2 sons with the Egyptian wife, but he gives them Israelite names. It's interesting that he doesn't give them Egyptian names. Very assimilated, obviously speaks the language, knows the customs. And as they come before him, they don't recognize him. But he recognizes them. And you would have thought that they would recognize their brother. Well, you know, people change after so many years. But he recognized them. Well, in that culture, because of his status, he'd have been shaved and painted. Special dress and a special kind of hat commensurate with his position. And he understands what they're saying, though he uses an interpreter. Why don't they learn English? Here he is, still knowing his mother tongue. You can be bilingual y no es problema. Podemos contar esta historia en español y sacar unas lecciones para nuestra vida y este país. And I can go back into English and I'm okay. No threat here. As if our German and Italian ancestors walk off the boat and boop, they went in through a force field and were bilingual, or they lost their Italian and German just like that and spoke beautiful English just right from the very beginning. How many generations? Right, I was at North Park Seminary a week and a half ago. The old Swedish covenant. What was the big debate between the first and second generations? Are we going to sing in the Swedish or are we going to sing in the English? Huh? It took them a couple generations. I was with the Mennonite USA conference in Phoenix in July. They were all talking about their German and Russian backgrounds, and they still speak German. So I said, how long did it take? 1 generation, 2 generations to get into the English? And one guy from the back shouted, 4. You ever thought of Joseph as an immigrant story? Knows his mother tongue, even as he's assimilated. But he names his children names from home. And then he tells them, when I die, take my bones back to the land. En his heart, en este corazón, fluye sangre chapina. But then, Egyptians don't like shepherds. But that was awkward. His father was a shepherd, as were his brothers. And he introduces them to the Pharaoh. But that was a bit embarrassing. But family matters. And this old shepherd blesses Pharaoh. A little countercultural there. The patriarchs, the Exodus. Exodus chapter 1, the Israelites are multiplying, and that's scary. Now, what the number was, what was the threshold that triggered the fear? We don't know, but it was a number. See, this is very natural. You see, when there are too many of them, we get frightened. I mean, we do this even if someone moves in next door. Have you had that experience where you're looking through the blinds? Are they going to take out their garbage and their kid's going to be well behaved? Or you know what? Even if they're of our own kind, we're kind of suspicious, And then you take over the cookies and you kind of look into the front door, trying to do the spy thing as you bring the cookies. Just to kind of get a feel. But if they're foreigners and there's too many, just think about it, you see. Our son went to Holy Cross, our younger son. So we'd kind of go into Boston. Then we'd have to take this train out of South Station. But if you come out of South Station and you look to your left, there's a sign that says, "Welcome to Chinatown." And there's tour buses that go in there. And if you want, the best Chinese food, and you have Chinese signs and people are speaking Chinese, no one's bothered. This is Missions Week. I got to tell you this story. You heard it last night. But my aunt, my Guatemalan aunt, she's like a second mother to me. My cousin, her husband was doing a PhD at Harvard. He's also Guatemalan. Now he teaches at the University of Colorado. But, you get these knock-ups in Chinatown. So I got a Rolex watch for $25. And so I was in Guatemala teaching for about 15 years, but my salary was coming, I had to raise my salary. So I remember being with the missions committee once at one of our supporting churches, and I'm sitting there asking for money with my Rolex. And I'm watching, the elders kind of looking at my wrist, and you're kind of doing this kind of thing, like you did. But the numbers, you see. No one's bothered with Chinatown. I mean, just take the bus and do your eating and a little shopping and take the bus out. But Hispanics are everywhere. It's an invasion. It's a horde. It's a tidal wave. Got to be careful. It's the numbers, you see. What the Egyptians did is what everybody does. They put laws into place to control the population. In their minds, it was, we'll kill the little boys. It's very human. The crazy thing was that they were putting these laws into place to control them even as they wanted them to continue to work. Does that sound familiar? We need them to work. We just don't want them. And they do this crazy thing. This is what people do when they're scared of the other. They put this law into place where it'd be harder for them to get straw for the bricks. Oh, that makes total economic sense, you see, because these bricks are for Egyptian buildings. So I know, here's a plan. Let's make it harder for them to build the bricks for our buildings. That's the solution. We need their work, but I know, let's do E-Verify. So we'll make it harder for them to get to work, even though we need them to work. That makes economic sense. It makes immigrant sense, is what it does, not economic sense. Fear of the other. Let me show you some slides from the 1890s. The Chinese, the first major legislation for immigration was the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. For the first century of this nation's existence, immigration was a state's issue. This is the classic American problem: federal government, state government. What you were seeing in Arizona was the classic playing out of the tension. The state saying the government's not doing what it's supposed to do, and the government suing them and saying you can't do this. This is the classic tension. So the immigration comes under federal jurisdiction in about 1875. The first major piece of legislation was the Chinese Exclusion Act. See, we imported Chinese labor. 1845 to 1848 was the Mexican-American War, which we started to get the land, and we won the war. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed in 1848. Now it's, 40% of Mexican territory becomes U.S. territory. 1849, the gold rush. We need workers to do the mines and to build the railroads, and so we import Chinese labor, the coolies. But after a while, there's too many Chinese, and so everyone gets nervous, and now there's race riots and lynchings in California. And eventually, it'll make its way up the food chain to the federal government. In 1882, we have the Chinese Exclusion Act, which will not allow any Chinese into the country with few exceptions. And even if you were born here, but of Chinese descent, you could not be a U.S. citizen, and that was not rescinded until 1943. Here's a cartoon, 1890s. Chinese trying to get over the wall, and pushing the ladder off the wall. What's interesting is the wall in the 1890s is a metaphor, but for us now it's a reality, isn't it? But the idea is already there. Oh, the Irish Frankenstein. Any of you from Irish backgrounds? Look how the Irish are being described. Dirty, they're beasts. His eyes are covered. In one hand, a bleeding knife, or a knife dripping with blood. In the other hand, a gun, and in his belt, another knife. This is the Irish. This is a classic one. The mixed message, again from the 1890s. United States of America, admittance free, walk in, welcome. And here's the other piece of it, holding his nose. This is the mixed message. We're a nation of immigrants, Statue of Liberty, give me your huddled masses. That was put in New York Harbor the same decade we passed the Chinese Exclusion Act. This is the irony of immigration. Looking at the caricature, it's probably an Eastern European Jew. And what the immigrant brings is disease and poverty. Anarchy's on his back. You know it's the 19th century because he talks about Sabbath desecration. I don't think that would be a major social issue today, but it was back then. Let me tell you some other quick stories because of time. Ruth, it's a story of integration. Oh, what an interesting story. You see Naomi and her family go into Moab, and the two sons marry Moabite women. You see the Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth, marry immigrants from Judah. But then the sons die, the husband dies, and Naomi goes back, and the rest of the book is the story of Ruth trying so hard to be accepted. If I had more time, I'd give you more of the story. But by the end of it, finally Naomi accepts the child Obed, the half-breed. I just came from Gordon College, and I was telling them, people like me are Obed. We're the half-breeds. American father, Guatemalan mother. I look Anglo. I don't speak English with an accent. You know? I never had to go through what my mother went through. How many Obeds are out here today? You know what I'm talking about. Daniel, I love to tell this story. That's a great story. You know, Daniel chapter 1. He's taken away before Jerusalem falls, and now he's given a new name along with his friends, a new education. They're training him for the empire, the very empire that would destroy the city. Probably killed multiple people in his family. burned down the temple and tore down the walls. This empire, which destroyed everything that he knew in his whole culture and eradicated his country from the face of the map. This is the culture. This is the empire he is trained to serve. How awkward was that? But they say, let us keep our food. Oh, that's a statement of faith. Yes, but it's also a cultural statement. How do you know a culture? By their food, for goodness sakes. How do you know when you're in the Hispanic section of Denver? Because there's panerias, and pupuserias, and carnicerias, and taquerias. This is how you know you're in the Hispanic section. I always tell this story. Every couple of years, I take students from Denver Seminary to Guatemala, and we do this thing with a seminary in Guatemala City. I tell the students, look, in Guatemala, we like black beans. We eat black beans for breakfast, and for lunch, and for dinner. And we can do the whole bean, frijol parado, we can do arroz con frijol, we can do the rice and bean, we can do bean soup, we can do frijol volteado, where you mash it up, looks like a meatloaf, and you slice it, and you put, dried goat cheese with salsa picante para chuparse los dedos. But you've got to get in training for these things because beans do things. Oh, Dr. Carroll, it's okay. We do cadobas. We go to Chipotle. Okay. We arrive on a Saturday night. By the Wednesday, oh, Dr. Carroll, for the love of God and His kingdom, McDonald's, American food. Now, there's a Domino's Pizza right outside the gate to the seminary. I walk in, you can't sit. So I said, look, Wednesday night, I treat for the pizza, and we'll watch a movie. I have my Mac. And we go, oh, that's great. But what they don't know is that Guatemala may be the only place in the world where you get black bean pizza. Before you think I'm cruel and sadistic, I would just get a small one and put it on top, kind of, and then we'd have the pepperoni. So anyway, but the point is, if I can have for breakfast some beans and toast and my cup of coffee, I'm good to go. It's the food. It's part of immigrant memory, isn't it? Right? St. Patrick's Day, what's that? It's the Irish. We all dress up in green. Even Dr. Smith can dress up in green. Oh, it's St. Patrick's Day. Really, you're African American. What's all that about? And we all drink green beer. Not here, of course. It's just kind of an hypothetical. And then it's Oktoberfest, right? It's the Germans, and we all drink beer. And then it's Columbus Day, and it's the red wine. No, you don't drink this. These are immigrant memories, you see? It's about food, identity. And then you have this thing in our homes, right? Oh, we're from Austria. Really? Do you speak German? No, but, we did the genealogy thing, and we go back to the royal family. All these genealogies go back to royal families. Really? Oh, yes, and, for Christmas we always eat strudel. And it's a family recipe, I can't tell it's a secret, but Aunt Martha's really afraid because the young women don't like to bake anymore, and the recipe will be lost for all time. It's the food. The immigrant memories. Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther. Golly, it's just a short chapel, and I got so many stories I want to tell, and curse you. I have like 3 minutes, right? We're on Latin time. What the heck? I'm going to go. Ezra, think about assimilation. He doesn't want anything to do with the Persians, and he goes back everything by the letter of the law. Then you find Nehemiah. He works for the king, and that's a great story. You read the last line of Nehemiah chapter 1. I was cupbearer to the king. Meaning every meal, his life is online. He was the food taster, right? And so chapter 2, the king sees that his face is sad. Even if you're a king, what you don't want is a sad face on your food taster. Are you okay, buddy? Is this food all right? We don't like sad faces around this table. And he'll go back for a time, and then he'll go back to Persia. And then Esther, of course, she needs to be reminded who she is. And what you see in the Bible not only is the migration process, but all the variations in the assimilation, integration process. Fascinating stories. Okay, my time's running out, so 3 quick points. Mission en la vida cotidiana, in the daily life of people. And as I was saying yesterday, don't make them your target. Move into life. Eat the food, enjoy the children, walk with them in life. Mission en la comunidad, in community. It's about community life. Fiestas, piñatas. It's learning how to think of mission, again, not as an individualistic North American, but as a community person who shares life as one of them. And it will take you maybe the rest of your life to ever be fully accepted. Moving into a community is like peeling an onion. The layers never stop, but along the way they're tears. But you know, it's good. And lastly, mission en el camino y en la corte. You do theology on the way. You know, when I went to seminary, we never talked about immigration. Look how huge it is in the Bible. We never talked about poverty, a major theological category in both Testaments. You will never find it in any index of any systematics. All these things about the Bible we never talked about, never thought of, in the safety of comfortable classrooms in huge libraries, somehow removed from la comunidad y la vida cotidiana. To learn the faith-given ones to the saints. Which saints? Those of color? And why just once? As if the Word of God doesn't live everywhere and in all times. But also in la corte. It's in the courtroom. If you work with immigrants, go to immigration court. In 5 minutes, the life of their families is decided. And there they are at a table in front of a judge in a culture they do not know, in a language they don't quite understand. In the next table is an ICE official checking them against the computer lists. Under current U.S. law, the U.S. government's not required them because it's a misdemeanor. Interestingly, it's not a felony. It's not required to give them counsel. And in 5 minutes, the life of your family will be decided. Talk about doing ministry and doing mission and doing theology in the courts. That's where theology lives. That's what makes it great. There's only 2 things that last forever: the Word of God and people. Give yourself to both. That's what makes life worth living. It's hard, but it's good. May God bless you.